Okay, I know the year isn't quite over yet, but autumn is approaching fast in temperate climates like the UK, which usually signals the end of the growing season. So it's a good time to reflect on the past season's growing and to prepare for the big changes in the seasons to come. So today I've got 14 points to discuss, covering the lessons I've learned and the regrets too, and hopefully they'll either resonate with you or they'll help you in your own growing situation. So let's get started. And we are in. Okay, the very first thing that I've learnt this year is that whenever I'm going to make a YouTube video, there's either a dog barking or there's going to be someone digging the road. It's just a fact of life. So seriously, the very first thing I've learnt this year is that using fleece as a barrier is something that you should really do. I wish I'd used horticultural fleece to cover all the doors, the windows, the vent openings through the warmer months. This year it's been all about pests for me, and preventing them in the first place would have saved me money, time and effort. The thing is, I've covered those areas with fleece in the past, but I didn't this year for whatever reason, and my goodness, I've paid the price. Number two is separating the plants out. I've always said I'm aiming for a jungle effect in here, and I've got what I wanted, especially over in the hothouse, but more plants equals less space between them, which equals more pests. It's easier for pests to remain unnoticed and also easier for them to spread from one plant to another when the plants touch. Many pests like mites, for example, only spread by walking, they don't fly. So where possible, separate those plants out. I don't know when or if I'll ever actually follow my own advice on this, but it's certainly something to bear in mind if you can do that. So that brings me to number three, which is assume you have fungus gnats. Even if you don't see any flying gnats, always assume you have them in the plant media. I'm certainly going to do that from now on. Populations, as I know to my cost, can explode in a matter of days, if not hours. I've therefore started periodically treating the water I use, whether I've seen any flying gnats or not. In the same vein, I've also started periodically spraying all my plants, alternating between a systemic and a contact spray, mainly to avoid some of the unwanted growth effects of the systemics. And so far, it's worked pretty well. Number four, get yourself a botanist hand lens and use it. If a plant shows any sign of decline now, I immediately reach for the hand lens and I closely inspect the top side and underside of the leaves. If I'd been doing that right from the start, I would have saved myself a pile of cash from replacing all the dead plants. The fifth thing I've learned is that you don't need daylight. Yes, you heard me right. My hothouse has proven to me over time that you don't need lots of bright daylight to grow houseplants. This building has a solid roof, only has a few windows, and it's shaded most of the time by large trees, and it's for most of the day. Yet even the plants up in the darkest corners have thrived. Well, why? Because I've got grow light. Grow lights can replace natural light, meaning you can grow in unusually dark places. Now this might seem obvious, but it's quite significant to me, and this point will be made more clearer in the next point. Number six, there are better choices than a greenhouse to grow tropical plants. Unfortunately, I've learned this too late. As autumn approaches and the temperatures begin to drop, a greenhouse becomes a costly liability, even if you apply a layer of bubble wrap. Efficient insulation is becoming increasingly important as energy costs soar, so it's occurred to me that a radical approach is going to be needed. So this year in the greenhouse, I intend to apply not only an extra layer of bubble wrap, but I'm also going to use something called Super Quilt Multi-Layer Foil Insulation. So this is a product designed for buildings. It has 19 layers, it even has some wadding in between it, and it should significantly improve the insulation efficiency in the greenhouse. The downside, of course, is that I completely lose all the external light, which is kind of, you know, in a greenhouse, it's not really what you want, is it? However, I do have grow lights, as you can see, and the foil is very reflective. Now, I'm not going to go into loads of details today. I'll go into that in another video, but suffice it to say, it will not look like this the next time you see it. Number seven is that holidays have consequences, not always good consequences. And I think no matter how careful or what contingencies for watering you put into place when you go away on holiday, expect there to be unwanted consequences to your plants. And you know what? It's nobody else's fault, only yours. The thing to remember is most plants recover. I didn't actually lose any despite all the damage. Which brings me nicely to number 8, which is plants want to recover. In my case, begonias, bougainvilleas, drosera, etc., just to name a few, they will all recover from total defoliation if they get the right conditions, and so will most plants. Even mite-infested plants will recover quickly if the mites are dealt with. So number 9 is actually a quick tip on saving heating costs in the spring and the autumn. Don't assume that all indoor plants need temperatures to be 18 degrees at all times. Many can actually cope with surprisingly cold temperatures overnight, providing they get the warmer temperatures in the day, as we tend to get in those 2 seasons. So my hothouse is currently going down to 10 degrees Celsius at night, but it's going to roughly 15 to 20 in the day, and there's no damage at all. Now normally I would be heating that to 18 degrees like all the time, 24/7, and the fact that I'm not doing now means that I'm actually saving some money. So that's a little tip during those 2 seasons, just to save yourself a little bit of extra cash. Another option is to buy a controller like the one I've got, and this particular controller can have separate night and day settings. So you can set the nighttime temperature much lower than the daytime temperature, just to make sure that you get that differential. And that of course can save those plants from that consistently low temperature, which is what tends to cause the problem over time. So number 11 is all about those considering buying a greenhouse for their tropical plants. Following on from the previous point, I now believe an insulated external building, preferably made from composite rather than from wood so it doesn't rot, would have been a better choice than a greenhouse for me, for my tropical plants, for I think obvious reasons. Number 12 is all about dormancy. Sometimes dormancy doesn't mean that they go completely dead looking. They can actually just go quiet for a bit. Now my cyclamen persicum are a case in point. They fought me all year in very hot temperatures. I've not watered them hardly, and they really didn't want to go dormant. They've kept trying to throw up buds, they've kept trying to throw up leaves, and I've kept them kind of ticking along, and eventually I've given in and I've started to water them. So this year I expect them to come into bloom. In fact, one of them already is in bloom pretty early on, and I don't think that's something to be too worried about. It's just the conditions. They'll be fine. They've had a rest, and that's really all that they need. Number 13 is all about microclimates within microclimates. Now, I've always been aware of the number of microclimates within all my grow spaces, but I think I still probably underestimated it. Sometimes just moving a plant a few centimetres from one side to another can make all the difference to its growth, like for example my Streptocarpus saxorum. I had it at one point where it got a little bit of sunshine, and I moved it a few centimetres to the right where it didn't get the sunshine, and that was the difference. That was what stimulated the blooms and stimulated the growth, and didn't have any more problems with leaves bleaching and dropping off and so on. A tiny, tiny little move made all the difference. My final point is something that I think we all do well to remind ourselves every so often, and that's despite our best effort, plants still die. I get some plants that do well for me for 1 year, and then they decline and they die the next. And then I think I've cracked the cur, and then they make me look a complete fool. And in contrast, I get plants that kind of limp along and then unexpectedly take off. It's all just part and parcel of the plant hobby. So tell me, what have you learned from your season of growing, both good and bad? Do you have any regrets apart from maybe watching this video? Thought I'd get that one in there before someone else did. And if you've had or are dealing with the dreaded fungus gnats I mentioned earlier, this video here tells you how I dealt with mine. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.